Hi, I'm Beth le Roux. I'm a professor of publishing studies at the University of Pretoria. I'm also on the editorial board of Third World Quarterly, and I'm a co-editor of the series 30 Years of Democracy with Professor Abebe Zegeye. Most of my research has looked at publishing history in South Africa in terms of social justice and activism and academic freedom. So basically what I study is how knowledge, how information is produced and packaged and circulated to different audiences. And in the context of social justice, that would also have an educational function and the function of preserving history, preserving different cultures, linguistic diversity as well. Books last. Books are stable. There is something that endures beyond some of the ephemeral forms of knowledge that we have, like journals. And they're also more accessible. More people can have access to books and can read them than some of the more specialized material. I also think that books have a lot of power. I think that's evident from book bannings, for example. Books would not be banned if they were not important and if there weren't ways in which they could tell stories or narratives that certain people would like to keep quiet. I've done most of my work in academic publishing and scholarly publishing, and they play a really important role in taking information that is produced by researchers, so based on really intensive archival research or interviews or other kinds of methods, and making that available in a form that tells stories. That means that we can transmit different kinds of narratives and different stories to different people. And I think that it's the role of an academic publisher to do that, to package the information for the right kind of audience and to make sure that it's available on as many different platforms as possible and available to as many kinds of people as possible. So Abebe and I, the co-editors of the series, were both former directors of UNISA Press. And I think we shared the same experience to some extent, that there were really important books being published and important work that was being produced. But it wasn't really getting out there. It wasn't being disseminated as widely as we had hoped. So we came up with the idea that since it was 30 years since 1994, when we were working on this project, if we could select at least 30 books that we thought were really important and that needed a wider audience, that needed a kind of a platform that they hadn't previously had. And those were books from UNISA Press, but also from Skotaville, which is one of the most important anti-apartheid publishers, one of the only Black-owned publishers to be formed before 1994. And so this series gave us the opportunity to partner with a bigger publisher and to bring out books that really had merit, that had a lot to tell us, but that hadn't been made as widely available as they should have been. So the series was born out of a sense of frustration to some extent, but also to celebrate the kinds of work that had been published. I think there are inevitably going to be imbalances. There's a power imbalance between the global south and the publishers and knowledge producers of the global north. And historically, it's been seen as quite an extractive relationship of knowledge and IP being taken from African countries, for example, and being repackaged and sold by publishers in the global north. But I think there are ways in which that partnership can change, in which collaborations can build and relationships can be made, especially in terms of sharing resources. What the bigger publishers all have is resources. They have infrastructure, they have people, they have training, and they have experience. They also have networks that they have access to. And where I think publishers like Routledge can help is in building partnerships with smaller institutions in countries, with different smaller publishers as well, training, working with the staff locally, helping from an editorial perspective, and then also in terms of the infrastructure. That shouldn't really be underestimated in terms of how books are circulated nowadays, how they are sold, the kinds of metadata that need to be created, the kinds of systematic production of knowledge. And the more that can be taught to and incorporated into the ways in which we do things in African countries, at universities and in publishing houses, the more powerful our voices can be, and the more platforms that we can access with our own voices. To me, publishers have a really important role to play in the ways in which people's stories and their research, their histories, their culture is disseminated worldwide. There's an imbalance in the types of stories that are available, the kinds of voices that we hear as well. And publishers have a duty, a responsibility to make sure that the voices that they amplify, that they provide a platform to, are as diverse as possible, and that the right voices get promoted at the right times. That might seem like I'm almost advocating a form of censorship that would suggest that certain voices have more value than others, but I think it's more a term of redress, that in the past certain voices have had a great deal of value, and the role of publishers will be to see what hasn't come out, what needs to still come out.